All right, yesterday it happened. You see it right here, a history-making headline for the record. The third time in history, a sitting U.S. president impeached by the House of Representatives. President Donald Trump now facing a Senate trial for abuse of power and obstruction of justice. Take a look.
If we do not act now, we would be derelict in our duty. It is tragic that the president's reckless actions make impeachment necessary.
Why do we keep calling this a solemn occasion when you've been wanting to do this ever since the gentleman was elected?
He solicited foreign interference before, he is doing it now, and he will do it again. The president is the smoking gun.
This vote, this day, is about one thing and one thing only. They hate this president.
Who sent his personal lawyer to Ukraine to investigate his political rival? Who fired an ambassador who stood in his way? Who conditioned a White House meeting on investigations that only personally benefited him and not the national interest? The answer to all of these questions is President Donald Trump.
This is not about the Ukraine. It's about power. Donald Trump has it, and House Democrats want it.
The president's actions advance national security. Oppose this impeachment.
This day was not inevitable, but it was predictable because this president has shown himself time and time again to believe that he is above the law.
History will record the Democrats' legacy as a betrayal of the Constitution.
Madam Speaker, I think when the history of this time is written, it will record that when my colleagues found that they lacked the courage to stand up to this unethical president, they consoled themselves by attacking those who did.
All right, I want to bring in Karen Travers at the White House, and we have our senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, in our D.C. bureau. And Terry, I could not have this conversation without you. How did you break down this historic day yesterday?
You know, Kimberly, it was a historic day. I'm not sure it was a momentous one. It didn't quite have the feeling of the constitutional crisis that an impeachment does represent. Certainly covered the 1998 impeachment of Bill Clinton, and it's different, and I think there are a couple of reasons for that. The conclusion is foreordained. Everyone knows that 67 senators will not vote, barring some bombshell new evidence, to remove Donald Trump from office. But beyond that, polls show that Americans are far less connected, far less following the news of this impeachment than they were in 1998. They aren't paying as much attention. I mean, it's a substantially fewer number of Americans are following the news around this impeachment. And finally, I think that goes to the nature of the times. Donald Trump is in some ways an exhausting president in the news cycle. He dominates it. Every day is a melodrama, is a kind of perils of Pauline, high stakes, it seems, existential crisis. And this is just another chapter in what has now been a couple of years of this outrageous bitterness and outrageous rancor and outrageous melodrama. And I think people are tired.
Yes, and Karen, a strong reaction from the president himself. He was speaking at a rally yesterday when those votes came in.
Yeah, and Kimberly, I mean, Terry's right. America, I think, is tired. Washington is tired today. But you know who wasn't tired last night was President Trump. He went to Michigan for a campaign rally that was scheduled before we knew that the House vote would be taking place on Wednesday. And in some incredible timing, as the president was taking the stage in Battle Creek, Michigan, an appropriately named city for this rally, the House was voting on the impeachment. And the president, right from the start, jumped in and said, in some ways, it doesn't feel like he's getting impeached, but throughout the course of a 123-minute speech, that is 2 hours, the president kept coming back to what was taking place on Capitol Hill. Here's what he had to say.
It doesn't really feel like we're being impeached, do you? The country is doing better than ever before. We did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong. Through their depraved actions today, crazy Nancy Pelosi's House Democrats have branded themselves with an eternal mark of shame. And it really is. It's a disgrace.
And Kimberly, did the president say anything new last night in Michigan? No. He has made it very clear since September how he feels about the impeachment process, how he feels about what House Democrats are doing to him. And last night was essentially the greatest hits. He was revved up. His crowd was revved up. But as I say, after 2 hours of talking, we're told that some people in the crowd started leaving. It was a pretty long one, even by President Trump's standards.
Yeah, and Karen, also at that rally, he was taking a shot at the recently deceased Congressman John Dingell.
Yeah, this was a bit of a surprise that is now causing quite a stir here in Washington. The president was in Michigan, and he brought up that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell had voted for the impeachment, like all the other Democrats yesterday on Capitol Hill. And he seemed to take a shot at her husband, the late John Dingell, who was the longest-serving member of Congress. Here's what he had to say.
John would be so thrilled. He's looking down, he'd be so thrilled. Thank you so much, sir. I said, that's okay, don't worry about it. Maybe he's looking up, I don't know.
So the president there was mimicking Debbie Dingell, thanking him for what the president had done after her husband had died. The flags here at the White House and around the country were lowered to half staff. But then the president seemed to suggest that John Dingell was in hell, not heaven, looking up. There were quick laughs there from the crowd. But if you let that play out, there's the noise turned into a little bit of a groan as I think the audience realized what the president was saying. Debbie Dingell responded on Twitter saying this is her first Christmas season without her husband, and that the pain is still there, and the president making it worse. Today on Good Morning America, the White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham was asked by George Stephanopoulos if the president will apologize to Debbie Dingell. She did not indicate he will. He doesn't usually in these sorts of controversies, but Grisham said the president is a counterpuncher who feels that he's been attacked for the last couple of months. Unclear how Dingell or her late husband were punching the president.
Yeah, and Terry, what do you make of this, of President Trump, making those comments about the congressman, also being so defiant in the face of this impeachment?
Well, the defiance is part of his strategy. Look, he doesn't think he did anything wrong, or he's managed to construct the narrative around that call that he was really talking about corruption when he mentioned his political rival, not politics, even though he mentioned none of the other Department of Justice investigations into corruption in Ukraine, only the one that happened to involve his political rival. But he has this narrative. He is committed to it. And there's one thing, he's a ferocious fighter and a counterpuncher. But there are some lows in politics and perhaps in life. Maybe you don't want to insult the man of a widow simply because she voted against you. Maybe you don't have to go there, but this president does, and he is not going to apologize for it.
So, Terry, what is this Senate trial going to look like? You've covered these before. You covered Clinton. So what can we expect when this happens early next year?
Thinking about the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton and the coming impeachment trial of Donald Trump, I'd suggest that we don't take the Clinton trial as too much of a precedent, because this one involves Donald Trump, and he is a very different character. The Clinton trial respected the long traditions of the Senate. They didn't call any witnesses, partly because the subject matter of that impeachment trial, which was his sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky, the senators found that icky. It was done in very elevated tones. Yes, it was partisan, but all the senators in attendance listening respectfully, the arguments couched in traditional senatorial rhetoric. I think a Trump impeachment trial is going to be a little wilder. I think a Trump impeachment trial could have witnesses. The president wants to call witnesses. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell does not. He wants a short trial. But I think while the likelihood is that this will proceed briskly and efficiently, as most of the senators want, they don't want to get stuck with this for a month. You never know with Donald Trump.
You never know. That's exactly right. Karen Travers at the White House and our senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, in our D.C. bureau. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And in the meantime, the race for 2020 continues. Impeachment sure to be front and center at the 6th Democratic debate tonight in Los Angeles. The candidate group a little smaller and a little less diverse. So for more, I want to bring in our campaign reporter, Justin Gomez, on the ground in Los Angeles. Justin, what are the things that we should be looking out for tonight as this kicks off?
Hey, good morning, Kimberly. So tonight, look for impeachment again to be front and center. It's probably going to be one of the first questions asked to these candidates about their reaction on the vote yesterday. You look for them to say how important it is to the country for this process to play out, but also look for them to pivot away from that too and go back to kitchen table issues that voters seem to really be caring about on the trail. At campaign rallies, we don't really hear much about impeachment from voters when we talk to them. We hear about healthcare, we hear about the economy and things like that. So all the candidates that are going to be on that stage tonight are going to talk about those issues more than they probably will for impeachment.
Yeah, and so, after snapping at each other for weeks, you have Elizabeth Warren and you have Buttigieg on the stage again tonight. What do you think that's going to look like?
That is probably going to be another back and forth tonight. We've seen Senator Warren and Mayor Pete Buttigieg really go back and forth for the past few weeks over transparency issues. Senator Warren has really been going hard at Mayor Pete Buttigieg for his private fundraisers, which are now open press. She pressed him a lot to open those to press, to get access inside, to see what was happening. She is not holding those type of events this time around for her presidential campaign. Mayor Pete is still doing that. This time press is now going in. And she also wanted a list of his bundlers, people who are raising money for his campaign. So look for her to attack him on that issue as well. Another issue that she was pushing him on was his McKinsey client list, wanting to know what exactly he did there. There didn't seem to be a smoking gun when he did release that client list, but we'll see if she takes that issue back towards him tonight.
So, Justin, who is the front runner now? Is Joe Biden still in the lead? Are people keeping up with all of this?
Yeah, I think they certainly are, and Joe Biden definitely still is in the lead. There was two new polls out this morning, one a CNN SSRS national poll, Joe Biden leading that one with 26%, Bernie Sanders right behind him at 20%, followed by Senator Warren and then Mayor Pete Buttigieg. About the same thing in another one, the NBC Wall Street Journal poll out this morning, Biden at 28% in that one as well, Sanders behind him at 21%. So the former vice president still very much the front runner this time around.
All right, so it kicks off tonight, and we'll be looking to see how that all goes down. Justin Gomez right there in Los Angeles, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And let's get back to Washington. Remember Obamacare, the nearly decade-old law taking more heat? Yesterday, a federal appeals court ruling the requirement for people to have health insurance was unconstitutional. So our DevinDwyer joins us now in our D.C. bureau to discuss this. Devin, what happened here, and what does it mean for the people who are actually using Obamacare?
Hey, Kimberly. Well, you may remember it was 1 year ago that a federal judge in Texas dropped a bombshell on both the political system and the healthcare system in this country when he ruled that the individual mandate that you talk about, that requirement that all Americans buy insurance, was unconstitutional, and along with it, the entire healthcare law had to be scrapped. It sent shockwaves across the country, raised the possibility that millions of Americans could lose those benefits under Obamacare. The law really touches all of us. Well, 20 states, led by California, appealed that decision. And yesterday, as you said, a appeals court panel in New Orleans came out with their ruling. They upheld the decision that the individual mandate is unconstitutional, that requirement to buy insurance. They said you can't do that. But they also threw a lifeline to the law. They said that the lower court judge has to go back, take a look, that perhaps there are some parts of it that can still stand, that should survive. And so it's a boon for beneficiaries of the law. Buy some more time for the law. But make no mistake, Kimberly, Obamacare is still very much under threat as this court challenge continues. And we saw both sides in this political fight last night talk about the stakes in this case.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you, is this what Republicans wanted? Because they've been fighting this for years.
Well, you know, they had such a hard time repealing Obamacare. Remember, President Obama ran on a promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. It never happened. They've been able to take some pot shots at the law. But this is a decision that many of them find validating. Republicans last night, the president celebrated this decision that parts of the law were unconstitutional. And it does buy him some time. Remember that Democrats won big in 2018 in the midterms, won a lot of seats on concerns about health care, the threat that this court case could take away protections for pre-existing pre-existing conditions, for example. 52 million Americans have those. But it does put some pressure now on Republicans to come up with a plan that can pass. They haven't been able to put something forward before. President Trump talked about a big plan that he has back over the summer with our George Stephanopoulos. He never rolled that plan out. And so this sort of guarantees that health care will be a top issue, as you heard Justin talk about in the 2020 campaign.
Yeah, and it's a very important issue. And I just want you to remind us, what are the consequences for Americans if this law is completely thrown out?
Yeah, a lot of us have followed the Obamacare battle over the years. Of course, you don't have to have an Obamacare plan to be impacted by the law, even if you have health insurance through your employer, like most Americans do. Obamacare has those protections for pre-existing conditions. If you lose your job or change your plan, it also mandates some certain required free preventive care services as part of your insurance plan. Also expanded Medicaid and Medicare benefits, lets kids stay on their parents' plans till the age of 26. So a lot of very important components of that plan, and a lot of people still signing up, Kimberly. The numbers have been in just for this year. So far, 3.9 million Americans have signed up for new plans on top of the millions that are renewing their plans. So the law is holding steady, and people continue to rely on it.
All right, DevinDwyer right there in our D.C. bureau, and you can see more from Devin at the briefing room, on the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. later today. Thank you, Devin. We appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Kimberly.
Yes, good to see you. And some breaking news, you guys, overseas. Russian media reporting a shooting incident in Moscow outside the headquarters of Russia's main security service. This after Russian President Vladimir Putin held his annual end-of-the-year press conference, speaking for more than 4 hours. Our Ian Panel joins us on the phone right now in Moscow with more. Ian, can you just give us an idea of what's going on?
Yeah, hi there, Kimberly. We're making our way to the site of what now appears to have been a shooting. We've just had a statement in the last couple of minutes from the FSB, which is the Russian intelligence service, the successor to the KGB. They're saying that there was one unknown attacker who opened fire, that person has been, quote, neutralized, in other words, killed, and they are saying that there are casualties. Now, as we're making our way to the site, we've seen multiple emergency service vehicles heading in that direction, marked and unmarked police vehicles, emergency response vehicles, as well as an ambulance heading towards there. There are multiple videos now appearing on social media, which again seem to suggest that there were a number of shots fired in that area. It's still a developing situation. As you say, President Putin holding his annual press conference today. There'll be questions asked, what was the motive of the attacker? Was it coincidental that it happened today? President Putin even touching on the issue of terrorism. Now, we don't know that's what it was today, but if that's what it turns out to be, it will be reflected in the statements that he made today. He's celebrating 20 years of his presidency in Russia, and he was asked what the lows and the highs have been. The lows, in particular, he talked about the terrorist attacks that have taken place, although Moscow itself hasn't seen a major terrorist attack for 5 years or so. But of course, it is a constant threat faced by Russia, like many other nations. Russia contributing, a major contributor to the ranks of ISIS. So, look, just to be clear, we don't know what the motive was. We're still getting information on the ground. But just to repeat, the FSB, the Russian intelligence service, is saying that there was an unknown attacker. That person has been neutralized, and that there are casualties. Or dangerous and get more.
Yes, and Ian, you kind of said it, but can you just talk about the significance of this happening on the same day as him giving this presser?
Yes, I mean, the press conference is President Putin's chance during the year to hold forward, to try and parade the successes, or what he likes to portray as his domestic and international policy successes. For example, he was asked about a number of issues around the country today, also talked about relations with the United States, he even touched on the question of impeachment, and he seems to echo a number of Republican talking points about that, but it's a moment for him to enjoy the attention of the press and the national media here. And this will certainly take the gloss off it, because everyone here already were listening to Russian media, already reporting this event. So they will want to get to the bottom of this very quickly to try and establish who it was that opened fire, what their motive was, absolutely crucially, because, as I say, the threat of these kinds of attacks is something the Russians are very familiar with, as we are in the West, and so they want to know exactly what the motive was in this particular instance.
All right, Ian Panel right there on the ground in Moscow with that shooting incident. Thank you for the updates. And guys, we're going to move on to the weather here. The first official day of winter is this weekend, but the winter weather has already arrived. As you know, the Northeast is experiencing some seriously cold temperatures. And yesterday there was even a snow squall in New York. And our Gio Benitez is with us in Albany, New York. Gio, how are you holding up there?
Hey there, Kimberly. It is very cold. Earlier this morning, -11 with that wind chill. Just very, very cold. And take a look at this, because we left these eggs outside. You hear that? They're more like cue balls right now. And you see this? It actually started cracking as it froze. You could see that yolk. It's just frozen solid. We are seeing incredibly cold temperatures all across the Northeast. Take a look at this. Overnight, whipping, bone-chilling winds taking aim at the Northeast. An intense snow squall with winds up to 37 miles per hour blanketing the tri-state area. This time-lapse video shows the sudden snowfall sweeping over Westchester, New York. Cars cautiously navigating the icy roads in the heart of rush hour. In Connecticut, you can barely make out the road from this weather tower camera. And outside Boston, snow falling hard and fast, leaving holiday shoppers scrambling to get to their cars. And this was the scene in Pennsylvania, a massive tractor-trailer pileup, killing one and sending more than 3 dozen to local hospitals. Drivers say when snow squalls moved in, visibility was next to nothing, semi after semi slamming into one another. And in Syracuse, as drivers were making it home from their evening commute, it was a virtual whiteout after a snow squall took aim there. And Kimberly, it is really worth reminding everyone that in these conditions, frostbite can set in. It is very, very dangerous. So make sure that you are layering up. I've got lots of layers here on my head and all over the place. So just make sure that you are covering up if you have to go outside. Kimberly?
Absolutely, Gio, and stay warm out there. And guys, to get a look at the national forecast, I want to go to our chief meteorologist, Ginger Z. Ginger?
Kimberly, thank you. Hope you're staying warm. We had our coldest air of the season settle in here in New York City, and it all came behind that snow squall that we've seen before, but people had a warning for it and a name to put to it. So I loved it because I had a lot of people texting and DMing learning about snow squalls. What it really means is that it is a fast moving kind of, there it went from clear to obscuring the city. You can see the visibility is reduced. You get a quick burst of snow that can make roads quite slick. And I think of it and like to explain it kind of like when you get a severe thunderstorm warning. It is something where you have sunshine and then you'll get this thunderstorm come in, take down visibility, certainly have that heavy rain in a thunderstorm, but in this case, it's snow. So now we all know, and we know that it can do this. Here's the unfortunate part and why you listen to the warnings. Union County, Pennsylvania, big time pile up thanks to this, and I know that was shut down for a long time there. Wind chills behind it this morning were sub-zero, anywhere from, say, Rhode Island and northern Connecticut right up into New England. Look at some of the numbers there, 7 below the Augusta, Maine number. And again, we were right above zero, but it's essentially the same thing down in the south. For them, freeze warnings right along that Georgia-Florida state line. Waycross, Georgia was in the freeze warning. Jacksonville felt like 29, so it was all along the coast, too, to Lake Destin. Now we've got to turn our attention to the west because there's a whole bunch of storms coming up, really just a big fuel of moisture that's going to bring flood watches, winter storm warnings into the Cascades and the Northern Rockies. What does it mean? How is it happening? Well, look how narrow the band of moisture is. It's represented really well here. As it comes in the future cast, you can see this is through the weekend. So everybody's starting to think about traveling, going somewhere for next week for the holidays. That's what you're ending up with, especially the Bay Area. You're going to get that heavy rain right at the coast. Up along the Oregon and Washington state coasts, that's where the heaviest 3 to 6 inches. But add the elevation, the Cascades, up down into Sierra, you're going to talk about a foot there, 2 to 5 feet up right along the Canadian border. That's really intense and probably great for a lot of the ski and snow resorts. Australia you got to talk about the heat, because if you're cold and you want to say, well, there's got to be some extreme somewhere else, there is. This is Australia. They had their hottest day on average as a nation in total, which is really impressive. It wasn't just one place. And they not only did it already, but they could do it today, they could do it tomorrow. So this is a long stretch, very high fire danger, and something that we are most certainly watching. Don't know where I'd rather be, but I know neither is that great. Kimberly.
We can't win. Oh, my goodness. Guys, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. And you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I'll see you tomorrow.